So one day while I was at work, I was listening to a past stream of one of my favorite streamers. They were playing a game called Moonlighter. Moonlighter is a game about an amateur shopkeep who moonlights, having a second job after your first, as an adventurer. In this game, there is a phenomenon in the world where a series of dungeons are randomly made for each adventurer who enters it. These dungeons suddenly appeared one day, and adventurers were drawn to it with a desire of money and glory. Now, these circumstances made some connections to a certain series. That series being Made in Abyss, as you can tell by the title card. Now, I couldn't tell you if the people who made this game were influenced by it at all, but there are a few similarities, like how the dungeons randomly appeared in the world, civilizations that lived in these places beforehand, how people seem to flock to the areas around it, and how the items found within are coveted by outsiders. These all could easily just be coincidence, though. As is the usual with my videos, the few that I have so far, I'll give a small rundown as to what the series is actually about. Made in Abyss is an anime that released in July of 2017, but there is a manga that started its run in 2012. If you haven't heard of this series, just know that it's very cute in some sections, and very much so not for the faint of heart. The story starts off with a little girl training to become a higher rank whistle, whistles being their way of denoting rank and giving people access to lower parts of the Abyss. The Abyss is a great big hole in the ground. Funny, huh? That seemingly popped up out of nowhere, and a bunch of people were immediately drawn to it due to their thirst for adventure. But this great big hole in the ground proves to be teeming with dangerous creatures and a horrible drawback for the intrepid adventurers. The Abyss is a spiteful entity. Not that it has feelings, but it won't let you ascend without a price. If you try and climb back out of the Abyss after delving down into it, you'll be afflicted with the Curse of the Abyss. The curse works as follows. As you go down, the drawbacks for going up get more and more severe. The first layer just makes you a bit sick. The second layer gets a little bit worse, but nothing serious. The third layer will cause vertigo and hallucinations. The fourth will cause body pain, dizziness with internal and external bleeding. The fifth says to have sensory deprivation, confusion, and self-harming behavior. The sixth will either endow you with the loss of your humanity or death. That's right, for all your hard work, death will be your reward. Anything lower than that is either certain death or unknown, as no one has ever actually made it that far. Now that that's out of the way, now to the actual reason this video was made. I had an idea while I was watching that stream. The idea was, what if this anime had a game? Or maybe what if it had an MMO instead? A roommate of mine also got me involved in a D&D campaign that he had thought up using this world as a base. And this campaign kickstarted my idea. Like every other D&D campaign, you start off with whatever your character would get according to the rules. I think the cool thing about it though was the loot system. The items of the world are just ripe for the making. There are just so many bizarre artifacts that are in the series, and so many of them could be created just for the sake of the game. Useful and useless alike, they would just be so intriguing. And with those ideas in mind, I was immediately drawn into this idea. I'm fascinated with the idea of a game based on the world of Made in Abyss. It would be perfect. The loot system is already there, and there are so many fantastical monsters to look at. Not to mention all the monsters there must be that haven't been introduced yet. I also enjoy the thought of being an average Joe in a game world like this. It would make the progression feel more real like that. Maybe that's just me, though. They could decide, however, that instead of the game where you play as a nobody, you could just play through the story as the heroes of the actual story. That'd be a bit boring, though, since we already have that story. Not to mention, we'd be very limited to what kind of attacks we get and what kind of movement we have. With building your own character, you could have several kinds of playstyles. Perhaps they could also do like a prequel story for the games, too. So you would start out with basic equipment, just like every other game. But instead of normal ranks and stuff like that, you'd get the whistles, just like in the anime. The whistles would basically be your keys and access to all the other areas of the game. The bell is for the tutorial, red is for the first area, blue is for the next, black is for people who make it through a lot of the game, and white whistles would be probably off limits since it's reserved for people who make it to the deepest layers possible. Though I doubt they'd be off limits for a game, because someone with more authority than myself would make the decision to do so. Any hoot, I feel like everything else in the game would be up to whatever developer would be making it. The combat and art style would be totally up to whatever the company could handle, and what they were good with, really. The game genre is something that's highly debatable as to what it could be. Would it be kind of like an action RPG, kind of like the Tales of games? Would it be something like Darkest Dungeon, where you send out people and hope they survive and come back? I feel like it could be anything. It just would have to match the flow of what the anime feels like and what the world is like. Now, as for if it should be an MMO, I really think it could work, as it would make sense that hundreds of people would want to dive into the abyss. Plus, creating parties is a no-brainer for this game when people almost always go in substantial groups to delve into the abyss anyways. Everything else I said would probably just fall into place too, because an MMO doesn't need to be any certain playstyle. It just has to have the draw to have a lot of people want to play together. Now, maybe this idea isn't super original. Turns out someone already made a video kind of like this, but it's not about making a game out of the world, it's about making a game out of the actual story. Maybe it's already in progress somewhere around the world. I just really wanted to talk about it with people and hope that it can get shared around and maybe happen someday. So if you see this video, please share it around or something like that. Maybe even if we can't get a game like this, we can get even more people to enjoy this incredible Japanese media that deserves to be seen by many. Oh yeah, if we do get a game, we might get more fluffy bunny people too, and that's something to look forward to.